As soon as we get to space, we get those things off. They're very uncomfortable and very hot. So while we're working up in space, we're just in t-shirt and shorts pretty much the whole time unless you're going outside. So, but a nice pressure suit in case something did go wrong on the launch or landing, we can actually survive with the oxygen system that's built into the pressure suit. That's what it looked like the night of launch. Right? That's not a photograph or a touched-up picture at all. I think I'm going to turn this sound down. Maybe we can hear some of the launch here. So we're launching in the vertical, of course, so we'd be sitting on your back if you were in the launch pad right now. And we hop in about 2.5 hours before launch. Let me see if I can get some of this sound. I don't think it's going to work. So what Mike Reinbach, who is the launch director here, is saying is, hey, happy Thanksgiving on orbit, because we were up there over Thanksgiving back in 2008, and just saying kudos to our crew for getting ready. Our commander then responded with, hey, thanks to the team. And as you heard Margaret mention, we kind of did a home improvement of the space station, so they called our mission home improvement mission as we got going. Let me full screen this real quick. All right, so we're getting ready. We're sitting on about 7 million pounds of thrust here that's getting ready to light off. All right. All the engines get up to about 100%. It takes 6 seconds for that to happen. Once that's all checked out, then we actually start taking off. As I'm sitting there, you feel the rumble underneath you of the engines. They actually, as they gimbal, which means they're just moving around and kind of getting the launch position, the vehicle actually moves. So I kind of felt like we were going to fall back on our, the whole shuttle was about to tip over, is what it felt like. And then you get going. Really fast, really quickly, obviously. So we're going through the clouds here. That was kind of a unique experience. It's like throwing a pebble in a pond, a still pond, to see the ripples going through the clouds. We get to this point about 2.5 minutes after launch, and the solid rocket boosters fall off. And you're seeing a camera from one of those boosters here. Those just fall in the Atlantic Ocean. We actually have boats that are sitting there waiting on them to pick them up and bring them back and reuse them on another flight. After that, it gets really smooth. All right, we get just pure acceleration after that. We're only pulling about 3 Gs, but it's just incredible the acceleration we're feeling. Until you get to this point where the big orange fuel tank falls off, and that's 8.5 minutes after we've taken off, we're in space. Going about 17,500 miles an hour. Really, really fun. All right, I'll get into more of that later. We are super busy when we get to orbit. Unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot of time to goof around and say this is really cool, but you do unbuckle after 8.5 minutes, you're floating around. And for the first-time flyers, that was really a truly unique experience to have, all full-time microgravity. It's pretty cool. This is the second day of our flight where this is a kind of a fallout from the Columbia accident where we, every mission after that, we get the robotic arm out and actually inspect the entire space shuttle's underbelly and wings to make sure there's not any damage. So obviously all of our accidents are very tragic, but we do learn a ton of stuff, and it helps the rest of us stay safe a lot longer. So the other thing that we learned was that this is video from the space station crew members, and they're taking video of us as we approach to make sure they don't see any damage to our vehicle. So we're actually doing a complete backflip there, as you saw, with the space shuttle, so that they can kind of video and take pictures of every piece of the shuttle. The third day of our mission is when we actually dock or connect to the space station. And I really, when I saw that for the first time, that huge space station rising up in my view, I think my mouth was like on the ground, because I was so amazed how big this thing was. I'd always heard about it and seen it, but until you see it, or not seen it, but heard about it, until you see it for real for the first time and think about, how many thousands of people were working on this thing for the last, 15, 20 years. It was a really, really humbling experience. And then to get a chance to go connect to it and dock to it was really amazing. So most of you may know the space shuttle shoots out in front of us, so we accelerate a little bit to get out in front of the space station. We're bringing together 2 vehicles going 17.5, so that's a great math problem, a physics problem there. And we do it very, very slowly to not damage the vehicles. Once it takes about an hour for all everything to dampen out, and we can open the hatches and go across and see our buddies over there. So the people in the blue flight suits were the 3 crew members living on the space station when we got there. They hadn't seen another human in about 4 months, so they were really happy to see us. And the gentleman there on your left, he'd been up there for 6 months, and we were his ride back to Earth, so he was really happy to see us. We were actually leaving one of our crew members, Dr. Sandy Magnus. We were trading her out for Greg Shamletoff. And once we got Sandy up there, that really our mission would have been completed. That's all we did was get Sandy on board and ride Greg home. But we got to do a lot of other neat stuff. It's been mentioned already, and I'll show you here in a minute. So I was a robotic arm flyer, so I got the chance to pull this big module out. You see me and Don Pettit there flying the space station's robotic arm to get this about 26,000 pound module out of the back of the space shuttle. This thing was just full of logistics that you heard Margaret talk about earlier. New bedrooms, new bathrooms, new kitchen, new water recycling system, and all kinds of fresh food, clothes, that kind of stuff for the crew on board. So a big part of our couple weeks up there was just getting all this stuff over there. So Don Pettit was really the mastermind of offloading all this stuff, and then we actually filled this module up with things that need to come back to Earth, and we put it back in the shuttle and bring it home. So these things here, we call them racks, but these racks weigh about 1,000 pounds. Okay, you feel pretty strong up there. But, you're very delicate with these things because they're multi-million-dollar pieces of equipment. And we really put in some interesting things. The first thing we put in here was a new bathroom. All right, it sounds kind of funny, but bathrooms are great in space, right? Just like they are here on Earth, and it's something we have to have. Before we brought this one up there, the only bathroom on the space station was on the Russian side of the space station. So just think of having to go way down the hall to use the restroom. And now this gave us a great capability on the U.S. side to have a bathroom. Now the more interesting things were what we hooked up next to the bathroom. All right, first one was the urine processor. All right, you guys can figure out what that does, right? All right, so connected obviously to the bathroom, goes to the urine goes through the urine processor, and it spits it out into our kitchen. Okay, and it makes these are really bad jokes, but it takes yesterday's coffee and makes today's coffee. But this machine, which we got the chance to take up to space, is something that's the technology that's involved with it is really, really special. So we don't necessarily need that on the space station because we can actually fly water there and get water there for the crew to survive. But if we ever want to go deep, if we want to go to Mars or the Moon, live for long times, we need a system like this that we can recycle every piece of sweat, urine, whatever it is on board to be able to put it back into our food the next day because you just can't launch with enough water to survive. So really, really neat technology. And the really cool part about that is we're actually using that technology here on Earth. All this stuff we're doing, thank goodness, is helping people here on Earth. So think about all the third world countries that potentially don't have clean water supplies. They're using that technology now. In small villages and small families now have access to clean water that they can just keep recycling their urine and sweat and everything. So really, really cool stuff from our perspective at least. Now, spacewalks were a huge part of almost every space shuttle flight, as you're probably aware. We got to train almost ad nauseum, but like 7, 8, 9 times sometimes for every spacewalk. We trained in the pool 7, 8, or 9 times, which was really, really great because once you get outside and you're that trained, you know exactly where you're going, exactly what to do. We don't have that luxury anymore with the space station because rarely do we plan spacewalks now. So the crew members are kind of generically trained on everything, but they really probably haven't seen the task they're going to do when they go outside. So it's kind of a really different paradigm that we're in now. We've got 2 spacewalks coming up in a couple weeks. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, July 9th and 16th. And Chris Cassidy and Luca Palmertano are going to be performing those. So we're in this new world where they haven't seen the task that they're going to go outside and do. So unfortunately for them, I'm going to be the guy reading them the procedures the whole time. But you may see my mug on TV and Mission Control doing that here in a couple weeks. So this is kind of a cool sunrise shot. So the sun just came up. It takes about 2 to 3 seconds for sunrises or sunsets while you're up there. I think most of you know it takes about 90 minutes to get around the Earth. About half of it's in sunlight and half's in darkness. So the temperatures, a lot of people ask me what the temperatures were, and the best I've gathered, it's about 200 when the sun's out, about -200 when the sun's going. So every 45 minutes, those suits are experiencing that temperature change. And of course, every piece of equipment you see out there is also experiencing that 400-degree swing. So really amazing work by our super smart engineers and scientists that have developed things that can withstand that. All right, this is just a basic task, but I like to show that nothing is easy when you're outside. So Steve here, my buddy, is just trying to put this rag that he used in his bag, okay? And so what typically happens is you'll put it in a little too hard, and then everything else comes out, okay? It's all tethered, but then it's just a pain kind of getting it all situated back to normal. And if you don't put it in, forceful enough, then it doesn't go in. So you just got to kind of play that game for a while until you figure out what the right amount of force is. When 2 people are outside, we always have 2 inside, at least in the shuttle world, running the show, reading the procedures. And again, we're in a different paradigm now. We don't have the luxury of having people on board that can do that. So when Chris and Luca go out in a couple of weeks, Karen Nyberg will be the only U.S. person inside. And she's actually flying the robotic arm for the spacewalk, so she can't read them the procedures as well. That's why you need somebody like myself that will be doing that from the ground. So it's pretty different deal, but I think we'll still be successful. We've been training pretty hard here on the ground, and we're ready for those guys. Here's one task I was doing. You see my helmet camera there. I was just fixing the end of the robotic arm. Those little cables had gotten out of position after about 8 years of use, and that's happened again since then. So we just periodically go out and put those things back where they're supposed to be. All right, the solar arrays are really massive. I mean, you guys probably know about 300 feet, about a football field long. And to me, it just struck me as we pulled up to the station how just giant those solar arrays were. Ladies, you see how your hair is going to behave up there, like Sandy's there. And this is just showing you how we get out of those big white spacesuits. They weigh about 300 pounds on Earth. Really bulky, cumbersome. Now, Steve had an issue because gravity, he didn't have the gravity assist to pull him out of the suit. He got stuck there in the middle of his suit, so Chris had to shove his head down. So we thought that was pretty funny. So Sandy had a couple of critters that she was working on up there, spiders and caterpillars. And one of the things with spiders was she was seeing if they could spin a symmetric web without the presence of gravity. So much like humans, it took them a couple of days to kind of get their senses about them, and then after that, they were just fine. Right? Cool. So here's our mad scientist, Don Pettit, with Alka-Seltzer and a bubble of water. Just watch, puts on a piece of dental floss there, and watch how the energy it creates is amazing.
Just throwing it off.
If you had 5 or 10 minutes, he would do these things. This is kind of the principle of intermediate moments of inertia. So if you're building a satellite, you want to know things happen like that so they wouldn't tumble. So this is our hero who was there for 6 months, and we're like, that's all you got? 6 months, and all you figured out how to do was to juggle, but we had that down pretty good. So when we docked and all the modules that we put in the station, it made a really busy intersection right here, so to speak. So we had 5 different modules that connected to node 2 here, and we're going to show you how you fly through all the different ways to do that intersection. Sometimes needing police. A little angular momentum principle. Some of these physics principles work opposite on orbit. Angular momentum work the same, so it's kind of neat to kind of test those things out. These are just some shots of daily living. They train us ad nauseum on every failure of the space shuttle or anything that we're dealing with when you're outside, but they never train you how to brush your teeth or eat or go to the bathroom, that kind of stuff. So I found that stuff really intriguing and you just got better at it every time you get it. This is our Thanksgiving dinner right here. Look at that, pretty yummy, huh? Dehydrated turkey and stuffing, it's pretty awesome. But they did think about us, I guess, and we had the correct meal at least. It was just tasting a little different than yours. So Don here on the left created this zero gravity coffee cup. Okay, as you're aware, like liquid typically just goes all over the place when it's released. Well, he made that cup the perfect angle that it would actually, with surface tension, adhere to the side of the cup, and you can just sip it. He sent that video down to Mission Control, and you would have thought like it was the greatest invention of the 21st century. Which maybe it is, but he just did have to spare 5 or 10 minutes that he had. And Mission Control really took off with that, and a lot of public outreach events. So really, really cool stuff with Don, and he's just that kind of guy. He's the guy you want on your crew because he can fix anything, and his mind's just going 100 miles an hour about what can I do next, what can I try out next. Really, really super guy. All right, so you're seeing some shots now out of the windows. We don't have a whole lot of windows on the space station. Now the cupola is up there. It was not there when I was there, unfortunately. So we really only had one window on the U.S. side of the space station that looked towards Earth. We had the 2 in the Japanese module that looked port, or to the left side of the station. And those were beautiful as well. But the Russians had all the good windows. They had 5 that looked at Earth, and they were spectacular. So if I ever had a few extra minutes, I would always have my head stuck in a window, and I couldn't get out of it. That's the problem. You get so mesmerized with looking at our planet. Really cool. So this is kind of a bittersweet day. We had to make sure Sandy was staying on the station. We got Greg. We had no problem getting Greg in the seat on the shuttle. But it's the day we were going to start heading back to Earth and undock from the space station. So in our world, as you may know, the pilot doesn't do much of the flying. Our commander does all the flying, except for on the undock days when the pilot, or kind of like a co-pilot of a normal airplane, gets a chance to fly us away. So Eric Bowe, who's the Air Force colonel in our case, was flying us away here. And he got us out to about 600 feet, and then he flew a complete circle, or fly around at the space station. So as a result of that, you're seeing all these pretty cool pictures here as we were getting ready to head back to Earth. So have no fear, the solar array on the left side of your screen had not fallen off. All right, it had not been installed yet. But the mission after ours actually installed another solar array, and everybody at NASA was all happy. It was all symmetrical. Anyway, this is another cool shot as we were leaving. The sun was reflecting off some of the modules on the station, so we thought that was kind of cool. The day before we landed, I got a chance to launch a satellite, which you'll see here shortly. It was a Department of Defense satellite, so they didn't tell me what it did. They just said push the button. So but it'll go out pretty quickly here, so don't blink. So that's on the back of the shuttle, and it was up for about 6 months, did its mission, and then it deorbited. So landing day, this is kind of a unique day, right? We've been in this spaceship for a couple weeks, and now you got to make this thing back into an airplane, right? So you got to get your seats out, you got to get, in our case, our suits on. It takes a lot of people to get suited up in a microgravity environment, as you might imagine. So Don and Heidi were the team there. There I am up on the flight deck coming home. And as Margaret mentioned, we landed in California. We always like to land in Florida because that's where they work on the shuttles for one, and that's where our families are, but we missed it by just a little bit out in California because the weather in Florida was just really bad that day. So looking back on it, it was kind of a blessing in disguise because it just gave us another day to kind of get our wits about us, and you don't feel great when you come back. So the next day we linked up with our families here in Houston, and I think it was good. So a cool thing about this, I think you know it's a glider, right? We don't have any engines, so you got one shot at landing this thing. And the commander has never flown the space shuttle until right now. All right, think about that. Okay, we can't just take it and practice our landings here at the local airports, right? So we have simulators, of course, which are great, but it's nothing like flying the real thing, and that's why we have these military test pilots, the very experienced folks that are commanding the space shuttles, because you only got one shot at landing this billion-dollar national asset. And Chris Ferguson, in our case, the Navy captain, did beautifully. All right, the whole team's obviously working to make sure the commander lands this thing correctly and properly. Now, we landed at Edwards, as was mentioned, but we landed on a runway that nobody ever landed on before. It was shorter and thinner than any runway that the shuttle landed on. So we were really concerned about this point. Our eyes were getting pretty big that we're going to run off the end of the runway, right? No kidding. So the parachute helps us out a little bit. We can get on the brakes a bit. You can't step on them too hard, otherwise you start brake fires, and that's never good. So we ended up stopping about 80 feet short of the end. Wow. So from the cockpit, it looks like you've gone into the desert. So anyway, that was our 2-week mission up in space. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me show you a few. No, I'll tell you what. I just want to get you a question. So I'll just kind of scroll these, and if you guys have any questions, I'll take them, and then we'll do some pictures, I think, later on. Yes, ma'am?
Could the water filtration system also work on salt water?
Taking salt out of it, you mean? I don't think it's designed that way, but I think we could design one. Yeah, and the folks that designed that machine are from Marshall Space Flight Center in Alabama, so I'm sure if that was something that we wanted to work on, that we could make that happen. Probably an easy change, with the design we already have. Yes.
When the shuttle undocks on the space station, is there a thruster system on the shuttle that pushes it away, or is it on the space station that ejects it off?
Yeah, so it's the shuttle doing the work in that case.
Okay.
So the question was, when they're undocking, does the ISS push the shuttle away, or does the shuttle push back?
So what happens initially, some latches release, and just by that releasing and then a few pulses from the shuttle, that gets you going away and separating.
When the shuttle docks to the space station, do you guys, since you're guests, I guess, stay in the shuttle, or do you live in the ISS?
Yeah, great question. When we get to the, she asked when we get to the station, do we stay on the shuttle or stay on the station? It's really up to the commander. For us, in our case, Chris Ferguson, he wanted us all on the shuttle, with one exception. But he wanted us mainly all on the shuttle in case you have an emergency. Then you're on your vehicle already, they're on their side. The exception was Don Pettit, who was the mad scientist we had, and he wanted to sleep in that module that we brought up and connected to the station because he was all day in there, kind of all day every day, and he lived on station for 6 months already, and the commander felt comfortable with him being over there, I guess. Not us, but him. But just when you go visit anywhere, it's just like when you're visiting a relative, right? We kind of came in the station, kind of wrecked the place, and then left. And so after a week or so, they're like ready for us to kind of get on, get out of their hair, because they of course got their house situated the way they wanted it, and we just came in and wrecked it for a while. But we try to be cognizant of that, but I think we still mess it up. Yeah.
Would you elaborate on your comment about when you come back, everybody doesn't feel like right the first day or so?
Yeah, so when we come back, most people don't feel great, and there's a wide range of what people feel. So I'll tell you what my personal experience was. I felt super dizzy. As we kind of came back through the atmosphere and the gravity started building until we landed on the runway and went back to full gravity. I was sitting there on the runway like I certainly weigh at least 1,000 pounds right here. I just felt like I couldn't even lift my arm or leg, and we have to kind of crawl down the stairs in the shuttle and get on our knees to crawl out the hatch, and then you stand up and you're just super dizzy. A lot of people get sick initially right when you come back in. We had about half of our crew that really got sick, vomiting while I was sick. I won't say it's common, but it does happen. And then so they get us in this little Astro van, they call it, our crew vehicle, and let us kind of hang out there for about an hour. And if you need IVs, that kind of stuff, you get them. If you just want to chill and get air conditioning on you. Again, we haven't had a shower or anything for a couple of weeks, so we don't smell great. And but you just kind of get into a flight suit like this. When they handed me mine, I went to put it on. I was like, hey, you guys gave me the wrong flight suit. This is way too big. But I'd lost a ton of weight in just a couple of weeks. So I was like, no. They're like, no, that's your flight suit. I was like, wow, it was like on a hanger, And so I just felt dizzy probably for about 12 hours maybe. By the time I woke up the next morning, I felt probably 85, 90% good. I was fortunate not to get sick. Either way, a lot of people get sick on the first day on the way up. Some people get sick on the way down. Some people get sick both ways. Some people don't get sick at all. It doesn't matter if you've flown before or not. It's just everybody's body's a little bit different.
It must be very hard then when someone's up there for 6 months.
Yeah, the 6 months, we brought Greg home. Yeah, it was tough for him for sure. If you do, although these days we've kind of figured out how to combat that issue, and that's if you exercise like you're supposed to a couple hours a day, you come back no worse than I was after a couple of weeks. So it's really amazing the strides we've made and gained over the last several years. So pretty amazing. And the last crew that landed, there was a Russian and a Canadian and an American over in Russia, or in Kazakhstan. The Russian, I mean, he looked like he never left Earth. It was unbelievable how great. Like I don't know how he does it, but they had something going on, I guess. Yes.
What was your favorite part? Or was there a favorite part? Like takeoff or docking?
Well, there's so many good parts. Yeah, so I thought about that question because I've gotten it many times, and I think, ironically, the favorite part about going to space is looking at Earth. It's just so incredible to see, first of all, see it from that perspective, but then just to see the colors, and you don't see borders, you don't see craziness and chaos and busy schedules. And it's just so peaceful and serene looking from that perspective. So just kind of makes you think, wow, if we could ever get there as a humanity, I'm sure we never will, but it certainly would be a better place to live. Having said that, the launch was absolutely amazing. Spacewalking was amazing. Just flying around was amazing. I mean, there were so many great parts, but I just kept coming back to, every time I passed a window, I'd stick my head in and I could not get out of there unless somebody said, hey, come on, you got to go do some work. And I'm convinced that's why they didn't put many windows on the U.S. side of the space station. So they'd actually want us to do some work. But yeah, pretty cool perspective. And to kind of tag onto that, the launch experience, Joyce wanted me to share with you guys because I shared with a group of her kids a week or two ago. But so we get taken off. I kind of mentioned it earlier as we got going. And for that 8.5 minutes, we're in and out of 3Gs. So you kind of go in, you go up to 3Gs, and you come out of it, and do that for several times. And I no kidding, I'm laughing my head off the whole way. I mean, I'm like on a roller coaster, my greatest ride of my life. And I'm literally laughing my head off. And people sitting next to me are just like, what is your deal? What's your problem? But I was really having a great time. I was completely relaxed on the launch pad. And I wasn't nervous. I kind of felt like I was right where I needed to be. And I had plenty of people praying for me. So I was very comfortable and just enjoyed it the whole way home. So, anyway. What else?
What
Yes?
do you guys do for fun? I mean, especially if you're up there for 6 months. What do you guys do for fun?
Yeah, so 6 months is certainly a long time. Usually the weekends are off, so that's kind of where you can decompress and do either hobbies that you may want to do while you're up there, or read books, or watch movies or TV shows, that kind of stuff. Usually during the week, it's pretty packed schedule-wise, unless something just happens to get done way early. So we'll have having people over for dinner, so to speak. We have the Russians over, they have you over. That's something that you do. Maybe have a movie night with everybody and sit around, do that. I know some crews that play chess with the folks in Mission Control. So you may have seen some pictures there where they'll do moves back and forth. A lot of people have personal projects that they kind of work on in their spare time, whether that's, I don't know what the recent ones have been, but Chris Hadfield, the Canadian, you probably are aware, he's like the social media god once he returned back to Earth, because he really worked that hard. He had his son working for him on the ground and kind of telling him where all these cool things were going on around the Earth. You know, there's some big festival in Ireland or something, and he'd take a picture of Ireland and tweet it down right away, and that just got huge hits, and they did that every day, so that was kind of his personal deal. It kind of kept his time. He's also a musician, so you may have heard his couple songs he did from up there that were really amazing. So, anyway, I guess that's about it. There's not a whole lot of places to go, so you can't go too far in your free time.
We trip on these little wires here. All those wires up there, all those plugs, all that stuff, and you guys are squeezing by them. I would assume they're all pretty important. So what do you do with the plugs?
The wires are pretty important for sure, and they're all very sturdy, of course, and they're much
really
more bulky than these are. And yeah, they're plugged in and also rotated and locking feature on the collar. So rarely could you go by it and knock it off. But when you first get up there, you're definitely clumsy when you're flying around. Like, we're in the shuttle, which is pretty small where we live for a couple of days, and you get to the station, it's this huge room like this, and you're all over the place, you're knocking things off the wall, and the station crew members are just like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? So you get better and better, and then you realize what you don't need to touch or stay away from, that kind of stuff. You are certainly clumsy at first. What else? Any questions? Yes?
You were talking about how she was doing research on the spiders, if they do it symmetrical. Well, how did that come out?
They did. After a couple of days, they figured it out. They could spin a symmetric web. So that was pretty cool. I don't know what she was doing with the caterpillars. I forgot to ask that one. But those are just kind of minor things. She'd have them up on a laptop, as you saw in the video, and every time you kind of fly by and you just take a peek out and see what they're doing. Oops, yes.
Can you talk about your process of becoming an astronaut?
So how did I become an astronaut? Boy, that's a matter. I don't know how I got here actually, but I will try to explain that. So I kind of always wanted to be one. I was a little kid when they were walking on the moon, and that kind of inspired me. My grandparents lived in Titusville, right across from the launch site in Florida. So my grandparents would kind of drag me out to everything that was launching back in the early 70s. And so I certainly had the bug in me, and I always wanted to do it. Then when I made the decision to go to college, I went to West Point. And when I went there, I was like, all right, so I got to figure something else out. Because I didn't realize you could be in the Army, be an astronaut. So completely kind of blew off the astronaut thing and just went in the Army and I was a pilot, flew helicopters. I met a guy when I was a lieutenant at a convention and was wearing a blue flight suit like this. And I'm like, so yeah, what's your deal? And he's like, I'm an Army astronaut. How do you do that? And so he kind of gave me some pointers. And I'd applied a couple of times to be an astronaut at that point, but I really, even though I met the requirements on it wasn't the website back then, but whatever the memo was, I certainly wasn't really in the game because I needed more education, I needed more experience in the Army and commands and those kind of things. So he just gave me a nice vector to kind of start heading down to kind of, I guess, get the dream going again of mine that I had. So then I really was charging hard. And it was a kind of a delicate thing in the Army because some of the bosses that I had, this was not really high on their radar, so I couldn't really ask for their recommendation. I'd have to wait till I got to the next boss and play that game for a little while. I ended up going to grad school at Georgia Tech, and then after that I went to teach at West Point, teach math. And so while I was there, it was a perfect opportunity to, because they don't really care what you're doing, I guess, in that realm. So I applied, even though I didn't get picked up. That was in the 2000 for the 2000 class. I didn't get picked up, but I came out kind of as a highly qualified person in that process. And so the Army folks that are down here, which is a small number, a handful of folks, at the time Colonel Pat Forrester was the commander, the Army commander. So I guess my name kind of popped out, highly qualified, so he asked me, hey, do you want to come down here and work for a while? Not to be an astronaut, but just to work. In the Army, we typically bring 3 or 4 officers down to work jobs that we only bring people down that are pretty good candidates to be astronauts, and we let them work here, and it kind of gets us to know the system, and they get to know us, and that's not always a good thing, I guess, but it worked out for me, fortunately, in 2004. I worked down here about 4 years out at Ellington Field, flying the Gulf Streams and training the astronauts how to land the shuttle. I'm like a helicopter guy. training the astronauts that line the shuttle, and it was a great job, whether I got picked up or not, but I got lucky enough eventually to get picked up. I think I wore them down over those 4 years.
I think we have time for one more question, so that we have a few minutes. Shane has to leave for another appointment at 12:30. That means we're going to take photographs with Angelita. We will not have time for autographs, additional photos, anything like that, because he's already brought you a signed picture, okay? So one more question, and then if you'll line up here and take a photograph, lunch will be served in the back. Go ahead and grab your lunch, and then